My name is Ramona, and I am 34 years old. I thought my 5-year marriage to Jackson was everything I ever wanted until that fateful dinner at his parents' house. We were sitting around the elegant dining table when Jackson made that cruel joke about me being boring in bed. The laughter still echoes in my mind. Little did they know about the medical condition I had been silently battling, and the reports in my purse would soon change everything. Let me drop my first truth bomb of many to come. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe to follow my journey of standing up for myself. I always considered myself a confident woman. As a marketing executive at one of the top firms in Chicago, I built my career on my ability to command attention and respect in any room. That confidence served me well in all areas of my life, except one, dealing with my husband's family. Jackson and I met at my college roommate's wedding 6 years ago. He was the best man, and I was a bridesmaid. The bride had warned me about him. "He is charming, but a total player," she had said. But when our eyes met across the dance floor, something clicked. He asked me to dance, and we spent the entire night talking. By the end of the wedding, we had exchanged numbers, and he called me the very next day. Our romance was a whirlwind. Jackson was a successful corporate lawyer with boyish good looks and a charisma that drew people to him. We dated for 7 months before he proposed during a weekend trip to Napa Valley. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was elaborate and beautiful just as Jackson wanted it. 300 guests, a 5-course meal, and a honeymoon in the Maldives. The first year of our marriage was passionate and fun. We traveled, we entertained, we built a life that looked perfect on the surface. But even in those early days, I noticed Jackson's need for validation and attention. He thrived when people complimented him or asked for his advice. He could be the most attentive husband when we were alone, but in social situations, he often performed for the audience rather than connecting with me. This was especially true around his family. The Wilsons were old money and highly respected in our community. Jackson's father, Harold, was a retired judge who still consulted for high-profile cases. His mother, Patricia, was a socialite who served on the boards of several prestigious charities. And his sister, Amanda, was a successful obstetrician-gynecologist at the university hospital. Their approval meant everything to Jackson. From the first time I met them at our engagement dinner, I sensed their subtle disapproval. They were polite but reserved. Patricia asked about my family, and I could see her expression shift when I told her my father was a mechanic and my mother a high school teacher. "How interesting," she had said with a tight smile. We always encouraged our children to socialize within certain circles, but Jackson has always had a mind of his own. That comment set the tone for our relationship. I was an outsider who needed to prove herself worthy of the Wilson name. For the first few years, I tried everything to fit in. I volunteered for the same charities as Patricia. I read the books Harold mentioned to have intelligent conversations with him. I even tried to connect with Amanda over her medical practice, though she always seemed too busy to engage with me fully. Through it all, I noticed how Jackson changed around them. The man who told me I was brilliant at home would correct me at family dinners. The husband who valued my independence would make jokes about my expensive shopping habits to his father. The partner who praised my cooking would compliment his mother's superior skills at Sunday meals. I noticed these subtle put-downs, but dismissed them as my own insecurity. Jackson loved me. He had chosen me. Surely these small moments of disrespect weren't intentional. I convinced myself that once I fully proved my worth to his family, things would change. I just needed to try harder. Little did I know that our relationship would soon face a challenge that would reveal the true nature of my marriage and my place in the Wilson family. The problems began about 2 years into our marriage. What started as occasional discomfort during intimacy gradually became consistent pain. At first, I ignored it, hoping it would go away on its own. When it didn't, I began making excuses to avoid sex. I was too tired. I had a headache. I needed to wake up early. Jackson was understanding at first. He would kiss me goodnight and roll over without complaint. But as weeks turned into months, his patience wore thin. The rejection was clearly hurting his ego. "Is everything okay between us?" he asked one night after I winced and pulled away from his touch. "I just have not been feeling well lately," I admitted. "It hurts when we try to be intimate." His brow furrowed with what seemed like genuine concern. "Maybe you should see a doctor." I nodded though the thought filled me with dread. Discussing such private matters with a stranger felt humiliating. Still, I made an appointment with my primary care physician the next day. Dr. Reynolds was professional but dismissive. After a brief examination, she suggested it might be stress-related or a minor infection. She prescribed an antibiotic and recommended using lubricant. "These things happen," she said with a shrug, "especially when the honeymoon phase wears off. Try to relax more." I left feeling embarrassed and unheard. The antibiotics did nothing, and the pain continued. The growing tension in our marriage became palpable. Jackson's initial concern gradually gave way to frustration. Our once vibrant relationship became strained with unspoken resentment. "Maybe we need to spice things up," Jackson suggested one evening. "Try something new." I agreed, desperate to fix whatever was wrong with me. We bought toys and lingerie. We watched adult films together, but every attempt ended the same way, with me in tears from the pain and Jackson sighing in disappointment. As our physical intimacy decreased, so did our emotional connection. Jackson stayed later at the office. He became glued to his phone when at home. The loving gestures that once filled our daily life, like morning coffee or surprise lunch dates, stopped completely. I tried to compensate by being perfect in other ways. I kept our home immaculate. I prepared elaborate meals. I never complained about his late nights or the growing distance between us. If I couldn't be the wife he needed in the bedroom, I would excel in every other area. After 3 more months and 2 more unhelpful doctor visits, I finally took matters into my own hands. Through online research, I found the Women's Health Center downtown, which specialized in sexual health issues. Despite my embarrassment, I made an appointment. Dr. Sarah Thompson was nothing like my previous doctors. She listened without judgment as I described my symptoms. She took extensive notes and asked thoughtful questions about my medical history, diet, stress levels, and the specifics of my pain. "Ramona," she said, looking me directly in the eyes, "what you're experiencing is real. It's not in your head, and it's not your fault. There are several conditions that could cause these symptoms, and we're going to figure this out together." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Thompson ordered a series of tests, including ultrasounds, blood work, and cultures. The process was uncomfortable and sometimes painful, but Dr. Thompson's compassionate approach made it bearable. The waiting period was agonizing. My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. What if something was seriously wrong? What if I could never have a normal, intimate life again? What if Jackson left me? During this time, I avoided family dinners at the Wilsons. I couldn't bear Patricia's probing questions or Amanda's clinical gaze. I made excuses about work deadlines and project launches. Jackson attended without me coming home with leftovers and stories about what I had missed. "Mom asked if everything is okay with us," he mentioned after one such dinner. "I told her you have been working too much." I nodded, grateful for the simple explanation, but hurt that he hadn't defended my absence more strongly. I felt increasingly alone in my struggle, carrying the weight of my unknown condition and its effect on our marriage by myself. 2 weeks later, I sat in Dr. Thompson's office, my hands trembling as she reviewed my test results. The room felt too warm, and the ticking of the wall clock seemed unnaturally loud. "Ramona, based on the ultrasound and your symptoms, I believe you have endometriosis, she said gently. Additionally, you've developed vaginismus, which is a condition where the vaginal muscles involuntarily tighten in response to penetration. I stared at her blankly, the unfamiliar terms swirling in my mind. What does that mean exactly? Dr. Thompson explained that endometriosis occurs when tissue similar to the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus, causing inflammation and pain, particularly during sex. Vaginismus had likely developed as my body's protective response to the pain, essentially training my muscles to resist penetration. Both conditions are treatable, but there's no quick fix, she cautioned. We'll need to address both the physical and psychological aspects of these conditions. She outlined a treatment plan that included pelvic floor physical therapy, pain management, possible hormonal treatments, and in my case, potentially surgery to remove the endometrial tissue. She also recommended seeing a therapist who specialized in sexual health issues. This is going to be a journey, Dr. Thompson said, handing me several brochures and printouts. But you don't have to go through it alone. I felt a complex mix of emotions driving home. Relief at having a diagnosis, fear about the treatment process, and anxiety about telling Jackson. I rehearsed various ways to explain it to him, hoping he would understand and support me. That evening, I waited until after dinner to bring it up. We were sitting on the couch, the television murmuring in the background. I got my test results today, I said, my voice smaller than I intended. Jackson muted the TV and turned to me, his expression a mixture of curiosity and caution. I explained my diagnosis as Dr. Thompson had explained it to me, showing him the informational pamphlets and the treatment plan. So, it's fixable? He asked after I finished. It's treatable, I corrected gently. Dr. Thompson said it might take time and there are no guarantees about how much the pain will improve. He nodded slowly, reaching out to squeeze my hand. We'll figure it out. I'm glad you finally know what's wrong. His response seemed supportive, but something in his tone felt off, as if he was reading from a script rather than speaking from the heart. Still, I was grateful he hadn't reacted negatively. The following weeks were filled with appointments, physical therapy sessions twice a week, counseling every other week, and regular check-ins with Dr. Thompson. The medical bills started piling up even with our insurance. Jackson questioned the necessity of so many appointments, but didn't outright object. I tried to stay positive, diligently doing my exercises and taking my medications. There were small improvements. I could tolerate the internal examinations better. The constant ache that had become my companion lessened slightly. But intimacy with Jackson remained painful and fraught with tension. As the weeks passed, I noticed Jackson withdrawing emotionally. Our conversations became superficial. He stopped asking about my treatment progress. When I tried to discuss the educational materials Dr. Thompson had given me, his eyes would glaze over. Maybe we could try just being close without full intercourse, I suggested one night, following my therapist's advice. There are other ways to be intimate. It's not the same, he replied, turning away from me. Just let me know when you're better. His comment stung, reducing our intimate life to a single act and placing the entire burden of recovery on me. But I swallowed my hurt and redoubled my efforts to heal. One evening, I came home early from physical therapy because my therapist had a family emergency. As I walked in, I heard Jackson's voice coming from his home office. He was on the phone, his tone frustrated and low. It's been months, Mark. Months of nothing, he was saying. The doctors say it could take a year or more, and even then, there are no guarantees. What am I supposed to do? I have needs, you know? I froze in the hallway, my heart pounding. Was he really complaining to his friend about our private struggles, reducing my painful condition to an inconvenience for him? No, I haven't told my family, he continued. Can you imagine what Amanda would say? Or my mother? They already think I married down. This would just confirm it for them. Tears sprang to my eyes. Married down. Was that how he saw our relationship? Was my value to him and his family tied solely to my ability to perform sexually? I retreated silently and left the house, driving aimlessly for an hour before returning. That night, I confronted him about what I had overheard. "You were eavesdropping on a private conversation." He deflected, his face flushing with anger. "I came home early and heard you by accident," I clarified. "But that's not the point. Is that really how you feel? That I failed you? That I'm somehow less worthy because of a medical condition I didn't ask for?" "You're twisting my words," he said dismissively. "I was just venting to a friend. Everyone does it." "You said your family thinks you married down. Do you agree with them?" He sighed dramatically. "Of course not. You're being overly sensitive because of everything you're going through. Maybe the hormones from your treatment are affecting your mood." His gaslighting attempt was so transparent, it would have been laughable if it wasn't so hurtful. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I was fighting not just for our marriage, but for my own sense of worth. "I'm going to continue my treatment," I said firmly. "Not for you or for our marriage, but for myself. I deserve to be healthy and pain-free regardless of what that means for us." Jackson looked surprised by my assertiveness, but he didn't argue. From that day forward, I approached my healing journey with a new perspective. This was about me reclaiming my body and my health. Whether Jackson chose to be a supportive partner in that journey was up to him. The monthly dinners at the Wilson family estate had always been challenging, but after my diagnosis, they became nearly unbearable. Each gathering was a minefield of uncomfortable questions and judgmental glances, especially from Amanda Jackson's sister. "So, when are you two planning to start a family?" she asked pointedly during dessert at the April dinner. "You're not getting any younger, Ramona." I felt Jackson tense beside me. We had discussed children early in our relationship and both wanted them eventually. But my condition complicated matters, as Dr. Thompson had explained that endometriosis could affect fertility. "We're focusing on our careers right now," I replied with a forced smile. "The marketing firm just promoted me to senior director." "How nice?" Patricia, my mother-in-law, interjected with a thin smile. "Though I always think a woman's most important work happens at home. I gave up a promising career in interior design when I had Jackson and Amanda, and I've never regretted it for a moment." Her comment hung in the air, the implication clear. A real woman prioritizes family over career. I took a sip of wine to avoid responding. "Well, don't wait too long," Harold added gruffly. "The biological clock waits for no one. My golf buddy Richard just became a grandfather again, and he never stops talking about it." I noticed Jackson remained silent throughout this exchange, neither defending our choices nor sharing the real reason for our delay. His silence felt like a betrayal, especially when he quickly changed the subject to a case he was working on. As the months progressed, I noticed Jackson creating more distance between us at these family gatherings. He would sit away from me, engage in separate conversations, and sometimes even arrive or leave separately, citing work commitments. At the summer barbecue, I observed him spending an unusual amount of time chatting with Eliza, the daughter of Patricia's friend from the country club. She was 25, newly graduated from law school, and laughed a little too enthusiastically at all of Jackson's jokes. I watched as he touched her arm while explaining something, leaning in closer than necessary. Patricia noticed my observation and sidled up to me. "Eliza's father is a partner at Hamill and Roberts. They're considering Jackson for their corporate team. Networking is so important in his field, don't you think?" Her explanation was plausible, but her smug expression suggested she enjoyed seeing my discomfort. I excused myself and spent the rest of the afternoon helping Harold with the grill, away from the spectacle of my husband's flirtation. The family vacation to their lake house in August was the worst. Jackson spent most of the trip water skiing with his cousins or playing golf with Harold, leaving me to endure Patricia's passive-aggressive comments about everything from my sunscreen application technique to the salad I prepared for lunch. "The dressing is a bit tart, dear," she said, barely concealing a grimace. "I always use a touch of honey to balance the vinegar, but I suppose everyone has their own taste. Even Amanda, who I had hoped might understand my medical situation professionally, remained distant and judgmental. One evening, I overheard her talking to Jackson on the dock. "Is everything okay with you and Ramona?" she asked. "You two seem to be in different orbits lately." "Everything's fine," Jackson replied tersely. "Marriage has its ups and downs." "You know you can talk to me if there are issues. As a doctor, I might be able to help." There was a pause, and I held my breath, wondering if Jackson would confide in his sister about my condition. "Some things can't be fixed, Amanda," he finally said. "Sometimes you just have to accept reality." His words cut deep. Was that how he saw me now? As a broken thing that couldn't be fixed? A reality to be endured, rather than a wife to be loved? When we returned home, I tried again to discuss our issues. "We need to talk about what's happening between us," I said as we unpacked our suitcases. "What's there to talk about?" Jackson replied dismissively. "You're dealing with your health stuff, and I'm giving you space for that." "Giving me space? You're completely disconnecting from me. You're flirting with other women in front of your family. You refuse to stand up for me when your mother makes her little digs." "You're being dramatic," he scoffed. "My mother has been nothing but welcoming to you. And I wasn't flirting with anyone. If you weren't so insecure about your condition, you wouldn't see problems where there aren't any." His response was so divorced from reality that it left me speechless. Was this gaslighting intentional, or had he genuinely convinced himself of this alternate version of events? Around this time, my coworker Taylor began noticing my declining mood. We had lunch together most days, and she was observant enough to see through my practiced smiles. "Ramona, what's going on with you lately?" she asked one day over salads. "You're not yourself. Is everything okay at home?" Something about her genuine concern broke through my facade. To my horror, I burst into tears right there in the restaurant. Between sobs, I told her everything: my condition, Jackson's reaction, the family dynamics, all of it. Taylor listened without judgment, offering tissues and validation. "That's not how someone who loves you should behave," she said firmly when I finished. "You deserve support, not shame." Her words resonated deeply. In my efforts to be the perfect wife despite my condition, I had accepted treatment that was far below what I deserved. Taylor encouraged me to see a therapist beyond the one specializing in sexual health, someone who could help me process the emotional aspects of what I was experiencing. Dr. Melissa Rivera became my lifeline over the following weeks. Through our sessions, I began to recognize the toxic dynamics in my marriage and the Wilson family system. I realized how I had internalized their judgment, believing on some level that I was defective or unworthy. "Your value is not determined by your medical condition or your ability to meet someone else's expectations," Dr. Rivera reminded me in each session. "You are worthy of respect and support exactly as you are." As my emotional strength grew, so did my resolve to advocate for myself. I gathered all my medical reports, test results, and treatment plans, organizing them in a folder that I kept in my purse. I wasn't sure why I felt compelled to carry them with me to the next family dinner, but something told me to be prepared. It turned out to be one of the most important decisions I ever made. The September dinner at the Wilson estate was more elaborate than usual. Patricia had hired caterers and arranged flowers throughout the dining room. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier, and the fine china gleamed against the dark mahogany table. "We're celebrating Harold's appointment to the ethics committee at the university," Patricia explained when I complimented the setting. Her tone suggested this was information I should already have known. I had made a special effort with my appearance that evening, wearing a navy blue dress that Jackson had once said brought out my eyes. My hair was freshly styled, and I had even splurged on a professional makeup application. If I was going to feel like an outsider, I at least wanted to look confident. Jackson arrived separately, coming directly from the office. He greeted his parents warmly, but gave me only a perfunctory kiss on the cheek. I noticed he was drinking more heavily than usual, starting with scotch before dinner and switching to wine with the meal. The first course was served a delicate butternut squash soup that Patricia made sure to mention had been prepared according to a recipe from her friend who studied in Paris. The conversation revolved around Harold's appointment, Amanda's recent publication in a medical journal, and Jackson's progress on a high-profile case. No one asked about my work or life. I was used to this invisibility at family gatherings, but tonight it felt particularly pointed. I ate silently, nodding and smiling at appropriate intervals. By the time the main course arrived, a perfectly roasted beef tenderloin with truffle mashed potatoes, Harold had turned the conversation to family matters. "Amanda tells me that Thomas and Kate are expecting their second child," he said, referring to Jackson's cousin and his wife. "That family is certainly doing their part to continue the Wilson legacy." I felt his gaze shift meaningfully to Jackson and me. The comment hung in the air, weighted with expectation. "Speaking of which," Harold continued when no one responded, "when are you two planning to give us a grandchild? Patricia and I aren't getting any younger." The directness of the question made me nearly choke on my wine. I looked to Jackson, hoping he would deflect or at least acknowledge the complexity of our situation. Instead, he swirled his wine and avoided my gaze. "We're still figuring that out, Dad," he said vaguely. Amanda, perhaps sensing the tension, decided to jump in with what she probably thought was helpful professional input. "You know, I had a patient last week with some fertility issues," she said, cutting her meat with clinical precision. "Waited too long to start trying. At 34, the eggs aren't as viable. I always tell my patients not to delay if family is important to them." The pointed look she gave me made it clear who this advice was really for. I felt my cheeks burning, but managed to maintain my composure. "That's fascinating, Amanda," I replied evenly. "Though I imagine you also see patients with conditions that complicate family planning regardless of age." "Of course," she conceded. "Endometriosis, PCOS, various structural issues. Those cases are particularly sad because often the women have no idea until they're ready to conceive." I saw an opportunity to broach the subject of my condition indirectly. "And how do partners typically respond when these issues arise? Are they generally supportive?" Amanda looked slightly taken aback by my question, but considered it thoughtfully. "It varies. The good ones educate themselves and become advocates. Others, well, not everyone has the emotional maturity to handle medical challenges in a marriage." Jackson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, draining his wine glass and immediately reaching for the bottle to refill it. "I can certainly understand the strain," Amanda continued. "Intimacy issues can be particularly difficult for couples to navigate." "I could tell you all about that," Jackson suddenly interjected with a bitter laugh. He was definitely intoxicated, now his words slightly slurred. "But Ramona would kill me if I shared our bedroom stories." A heavy silence fell over the table. Patricia looked scandalized, Harold uncomfortable, and Amanda professionally intrigued. I sat perfectly still, my heart pounding in my chest. "Jackson," Patricia admonished softly, "that's hardly appropriate dinner conversation." But Jackson, emboldened by alcohol and perhaps by years of putting his family's approval above my dignity, continued. "What, we're all adults here, and Amanda's a doctor. She deals with this stuff all the time." He turned to his sister with a conspiratorial smirk. "You want to know about boring in bed? Try being married to someone who flinches every time you touch them." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The room seemed to spin around me as his family exchanged awkward glances, uncomfortable laughter escaping from Patricia and Harold. Amanda maintained her professional demeanor, but couldn't hide a flash of judgment in her eyes. In that moment, I saw clearly what I had suspected for months. My husband had betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way. He had taken my pain, my private medical struggle, and turned it into a punchline for his family's entertainment. all to distance himself from what he saw as my failure to position himself as the victim rather than acknowledge his role as an unsupportive partner. 1,000 responses flashed through my mind. I could leave dramatically. I could cry. I could lash out at Jackson with equally humiliating revelations. I could simply sit there and take it as I had taken so many smaller indignities over the years. Instead, I took a deep breath and reached for my purse. As the uncomfortable laughter died down and an awkward silence fell over the table, I pulled out the folder containing my medical reports. My hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my body. "Since we're being so open about our intimate life," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "perhaps you'd all be interested in the medical context for Jackson's complaint." All eyes turned to me as I placed the folder on the table, opening it to reveal the neatly organized medical documents inside. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from awkward amusement to tense curiosity. "For the past year," I began, my voice growing stronger with each word, "I have been dealing with a painful medical condition called endometriosis, combined with secondary vaginismus." I looked directly at Amanda, the doctor in the room. "As a medical professional, Amanda, you're familiar with how debilitating these conditions can be, aren't you?" Amanda's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing genuine surprise. "Yes," she admitted. "Both can cause extreme pain during intercourse and other activities." I nodded and continued addressing the entire table, but avoiding Jackson's gaze. "I was diagnosed after months of seeking help from doctors who dismissed my pain. I've been in physical therapy twice a week on medication and following a comprehensive treatment plan." I pulled out the first report, a detailed ultrasound showing the endometrial tissue that had grown outside my uterus. "This is what's happening inside my body," I explained, sliding it toward Harold and Patricia. "Those growths cause inflammation and scarring, making even the gentlest touch excruciating." Patricia's face had transformed from shocked embarrassment to something that looked almost like compassion. Harold appeared deeply uncomfortable, stealing glances at his son, whose face had drained of all color. "And this," I continued, pulling out Dr. Thompson's treatment notes, "is the physical therapy protocol I've been following to retrain my muscles, not to expect pain during intimacy. It's a slow process that requires patience and understanding from both partners." I finally allowed myself to look at Jackson, who was staring at his plate, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Unfortunately, some partners find it easier to mock their wives than to support them through a medical crisis." Amanda reached for one of the reports, her clinical interest apparently overriding the social awkwardness of the moment. "This is quite severe," she noted, studying the images. "And you've been dealing with this for a year?" "Yes," I confirmed. "A year of paying doctor's appointments and treatments. A year of trying to hide my condition from all of you because my husband was ashamed of it. A year of being made to feel that my medical problem was somehow a personal failure." Jackson finally found his voice, though it was weak and defensive. "You're making it sound worse than it is. I've been supportive." "Supportive?" I repeated incredulously. "You complained to your friend Mark that I wasn't meeting your needs. You flirted with Eliza right in front of me. You just mocked my pain as being boring in bed to your entire family." Jackson's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're embarrassing yourself right now," he hissed. "This isn't the place for this discussion." "Where is the place, Jackson?" I asked calmly. "You made our private struggle public when you decided to humiliate me in front of your family. I'm simply providing the context you conveniently left out." Patricia cleared her throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Ramona, dear, we had no idea you were going through this. Jackson never mentioned any health concerns." "Of course he didn't," I replied, not unkindly. "He was too busy maintaining the image of the perfect son with the perfect life. Admitting his wife had a medical problem that affected your expectations of grandchildren would tarnish that image." Harold, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Son, is this true? You knew about your wife's condition and didn't support her." Jackson squirmed under his father's disapproving gaze. "It's complicated, Dad. She's making it sound one-sided." "What's complicated about supporting your wife through a medical condition?" Harold pressed his voice stern. "That's the most basic commitment in a marriage." "Especially as a Wilson," Patricia added, surprising me with her support. "We raised you to stand by your family through difficult times." Amanda was still reviewing my medical documents with professional interest. "This treatment plan is actually quite comprehensive," she noted. "Dr. Sarah Thompson is excellent. I've referred patients to her." She looked up at me with newfound respect. "You've been doing everything right medically. This isn't about you being boring or difficult. It's about a legitimate health condition that requires management and support." The validation from a medical professional, especially one who had previously seemed to judge me, was unexpectedly powerful. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back, determined to maintain my composure. "Thank you," I said to Amanda. "That means a lot coming from you." Jackson attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Look, I may have had a few too many drinks and said something stupid. Can we just move past this?" "No, Jackson, we can't," I said firmly. "This isn't about one thoughtless comment. This is about months of emotional neglect. While I've been fighting to heal my body, you've been undermining me at every turn, making me feel like a burden, a disappointment, someone who isn't living up to the Wilson standard." Patricia surprised me by reaching across the table to place her hand over mine. "Ramona, I had no idea, and I fear I may have contributed to your feeling unwelcome. For that, I am truly sorry." Her unexpected apology nearly broke my composure. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "You know," Patricia continued, glancing at Harold, "I had my own health struggles early in our marriage. Nothing like what you're going through, but challenging nonetheless." Harold nodded, his expression softening with the memory. "Patricia had severe postpartum depression after Amanda was born. Back then, it wasn't something people talked about. We kept it private, handled it as a family." "Maybe too private," Patricia admitted. "Perhaps, if we had been more open, it wouldn't still carry such stigma today." This revelation about the seemingly perfect Patricia Wilson stunned me. I had always seen her as invulnerable, the flawless matriarch who judged my every flaw. "I never knew," Jackson said, looking genuinely surprised. "We didn't talk about it," Harold explained. "That was the way of our generation. But that doesn't mean it's the right way." He fixed his son with a stern look. "And it certainly doesn't excuse humiliating your wife instead of supporting her." Jackson's face flushed with shame. "I didn't mean to humiliate her. I was just frustrated and had too much to drink." "That's not an excuse," I said, finding my voice again. "My worth isn't defined by my medical condition or by my ability to fulfill your sexual expectations. I deserve a partner who stands beside me during the hardest moments, not one who uses my pain as a punchline." I stood up, gathering my medical documents with steady hands. I've spent a year trying to fix myself, believing that if I could just get better, our marriage would heal too. But I see now that the problem isn't just in my body. It's in the foundation of our relationship. The room fell silent as I put the papers back in my purse and straightened my shoulders. "Thank you for dinner," I said to Patricia and Harold. "I apologize for the disruption, but perhaps some truths needed to be spoken." I turned to leave, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I heard chairs scraping as Jackson got up to follow me. "Ramona, wait," he called as I reached the foyer. "You can't just leave like this." I turned to face him, seeing not the confident man I had married, but a panicked boy, afraid of losing control. I can, and I am. Where are you going? He demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and fear. I don't know yet, I admitted. But for the first time in a long time, I'm making a decision based on what I need, not what everyone else expects of me. You're overreacting, he said, his tone shifting to the condescending one he often used when trying to manage me. Come back inside. We can talk about this at home. No, Jackson. We've done enough talking. Or rather, I've done enough listening to you talk about me around me, but never with me. As I walked to my car, I heard him following, alternating between apologizing and blaming me for embarrassing him. His words washed over me without penetrating. The spell was broken. I got into my car, locked the doors, and drove away, leaving Jackson standing in his parents' driveway, finally speechless. I spent that night at Taylor's apartment, crying and talking until the early hours of the morning. When I finally fell asleep on her couch, it was the most peaceful rest I had experienced in months. The burden of pretending, of trying to be worthy of the Wilson name, had lifted. The next morning, I called a lawyer. By the end of the week, I had filed for divorce and moved my essential belongings to a short-term rental. Jackson vacillated between desperate pleas for reconciliation and angry accusations. One moment, he would send flowers with apologetic notes. The next, he would threaten to contest the divorce and leave me with nothing. Let him try, my lawyer said confidently. No judge will look favorably on a man who publicly humiliated his wife for having a medical condition. What surprised me most during this tumultuous period was the support I received from unexpected quarters. Amanda called me 3 days after the dinner. I wanted to apologize, she said without preamble. As a doctor, I should have recognized the signs, or at least created a space where you felt comfortable sharing your struggles. And as a sister-in-law, I should have been more welcoming. Her candor took me aback. Thank you, Amanda. That means a lot. I also wanted you to know that I've spoken with several colleagues who specialize in endometriosis treatment. If you'd like, I can arrange a consultation with Dr. Winters at the University Hospital. She's doing groundbreaking work with minimally invasive surgical techniques. I was speechless for a moment. You do that for me, even though Jackson and I are separating. Your health doesn't become less important because your marriage is ending, she said firmly. And honestly, based on what I saw at dinner, I think you're making the right decision. Even more surprising was the letter I received from Patricia a week later. Handwritten on her personal stationery, it was a heartfelt apology for the family culture that had made me feel I needed to hide my condition. I realize now how our emphasis on perfection and appearances created an environment where vulnerability was seen as weakness, she wrote. Harold and I have had many discussions since that dinner about the values we truly want to embody as a family. Your courage in standing up for yourself has inspired us to reconsider many things. While navigating the legal and emotional complexities of ending my marriage, I remained committed to my health journey. I continued my physical therapy sessions, tried the specialist Amanda recommended, and joined a support group for women with endometriosis. In this group, I found a community of women who understood what I was going through without judgment. They shared their own stories of partners who had failed them and partners who had stood by them. Their experiences helped me see that while my condition had revealed the flaws in my marriage, it wasn't the cause of them. Those flaws had always been there, hidden beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life. With the pressure of trying to save my marriage lifted, I found that my treatment progressed more rapidly. The constant stress of trying to meet Jackson's expectations had been exacerbating my symptoms. As I focused on healing for myself rather than to please him, my body began to respond more positively to therapy. 3 months after moving out, I found a lovely one-bedroom apartment overlooking the river. Decorating it became a form of therapy, choosing every piece with only my preferences in mind. No more of Jackson's modernist art that left me cold, or the uncomfortable designer furniture chosen for appearance rather than comfort. My new home became a sanctuary filled with soft textures, warm colors, and mementos of my pre-Jackson life that I had packed away to accommodate his aesthetic. As my confidence grew, I began to consider dating again. The prospect was terrifying. How would I explain my condition to a new partner? Would anyone be willing to navigate the complications it presented? My therapist encouraged me to be open from the beginning. The right person will see your health challenges as just one part of who you are, not a definition or limitation, she assured me. 6 months after that fateful dinner, I met Daniel at a fundraiser for endometriosis research that Amanda had invited me to. He was a physical therapist who specialized in pelvic floor rehabilitation there to support a cousin with the condition. Our conversation was easy and natural, and when I cautiously mentioned my own diagnosis, his response was refreshingly matter-of-fact. "That must be challenging," he said. "How are you managing it? No judgment, no discomfort, just genuine interest and empathy." We exchanged numbers, and our first date was a walk through the botanical gardens, allowing us to talk without the pressure of a formal dinner. When our relationship progressed to the point where intimacy became a possibility, I was terrified, but determined to be honest. I explained my condition in detail, the treatments I was undergoing, and the limitations it might place on physical aspects of our relationship. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Daniel said, taking my hands in his. "We'll figure it out together at whatever pace works for you. There are many ways to be close." His response brought tears to my eyes. This was what support looked like. This was what I had deserved all along. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings dragged on. Jackson fought every concession, dragging his feet on financial disclosures and contesting the division of assets. His initial contrition had hardened into resentment, especially as word got out about my new relationship. "You clearly weren't that sick if you're already with someone else," he spat during a tense meeting with our lawyers. "My condition doesn't prevent me from being in a relationship with someone who respects me," I replied calmly. "It just made it impossible to stay in one with someone who didn't." The final confrontation came when I went to the house to collect the last of my belongings. Jackson was supposed to be at work, but his car was in the driveway. I nearly turned around, but decided I was done letting fear of confrontation control my actions. He was in the living room, surrounded by boxes. "I was going to drop these off," he said, gesturing to them. "Some of your family photos and the jewelry from your grandmother." "Thank you," I said cautiously, surprised by the gesture. He nodded, then reached for a small velvet box on the coffee table. "I also wanted to return this. It was my grandmother's, so technically it should stay in the family." Inside was an antique sapphire ring that Patricia had given me on our first anniversary. "It belongs to a Wilson woman," she had said proudly. "And now, that's you." I took the box, strangely unmoved by this symbolic severing of ties to his family. "Is your mother asking for it back?" Jackson looked uncomfortable. "Not exactly, but I assumed." "You assumed wrong again?" came Patricia's voice from the doorway. I hadn't noticed her car outside. "I gave that ring to Ramona, not to you to give to Ramona. There's a difference." She walked into the room with the regal bearing I had once found so intimidating. Now I recognized it as a woman who had fought her own battles and survived. "The ring was a gift," Patricia continued. "Gifts don't come with conditions even when marriages end." She turned to me. "Unless you don't want it anymore, which I would completely understand." I looked down at the sapphire, remembering how proud I had been to receive it, how it had symbolized acceptance into a family I had desperately wanted to impress. "Thank you, Patricia, but I think it should stay with the Wilsons. Perhaps Amanda's daughter will wear it someday." Patricia nodded, understanding the symbolism of my decision. I was declining not just the ring, but the need for their approval that it represented. As I drove away from the house that had never truly felt like home, I realized that the painful dinner that had ended my marriage had also been the beginning of my liberation. By standing up for myself, I had broken free from the constraints of others' expectations. I had learned that my worth wasn't determined by my ability to please others or conform to their standards. 1 year after that September dinner, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. My health had improved significantly with consistent treatment and reduced stress. While I still had occasional flare-ups, I had learned to manage them without shame or secrecy. My relationship with Daniel continued to grow, built on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect. He never made me feel defective or burdensome because of my condition. Instead, he educated himself about endometriosis, accompanied me to appointments when I wanted support, and always followed my lead regarding intimacy. Surprisingly, I maintained a friendship with Amanda, who had become a vocal advocate for better endometriosis awareness among her medical colleagues. She had apologized multiple times for not recognizing my symptoms earlier, and I had forgiven her, recognizing that we had both been trapped in the Wilson family's culture of appearances over authenticity. The divorce was finally settled, with Jackson eventually agreeing to fair terms after Harold intervened. I emerged financially secure and emotionally stronger than I had ever been. Looking back at the woman I was before, so desperate for approval that I would endure humiliation and neglect, I barely recognized her. The journey through pain, both physical and emotional, had transformed me. I had learned that speaking truth, however uncomfortable, was the first step toward healing. That standing up for yourself, even when it means standing alone, is an act of self-love that ripples outward, changing not just your life, but the lives of those around you. We often accept the treatment we think we deserve. For too long, I believed I deserved conditional love, judgment, and dismissal because I wasn't perfect. Now I know that true love, whether from a partner, family, or ourselves, accepts imperfection, embraces vulnerability, and grows stronger through challenges rather than retreating from them. If my story resonates with you, please remember that your worth is not diminished by your struggles. Whether you're facing health challenges, relationship difficulties, or family dynamics that make you feel small, you deserve to be heard, respected, and supported. Sometimes, the most painful moments lead to the greatest growth if we have the courage to learn from them. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself in a relationship or family situation? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of resilience and growth, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, speaking your truth is the first step to finding your strength.